Welcome to A Comic a Day, and this month we are celebrating the birth month of my favorite comic book company, Aftershock Comics. They turned 2 this year, and my god has it been an absolutely brilliant 2 years since. But you'll see what I mean this month. As always, links to buy these comics are in the description, and become a patron to help support the Comic Archivist family of channels. Warning, massive spoilers are massive this month. On with the show. Dreaming Eagles number 1. We Cannot Consecrate. 1966. Outside his bar, the Silver Pony, Mr. Reggie Atkinson stands on a quiet night, watching a plane fly overhead. One of his staff comes out to say that they're running low on Schlitz, which is a malt liquor for anyone who doesn't know their old school booze. Mr. Atkinson says he'll come in a minute to help, but when he does turn to go help, he sees someone dart to the side door of his place through the alley. Following, he enters the dingy janitorial room, and at the sink, his son Lee cleaning off blood from his face. He went to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talk and got into a fight with some white boys. Yet Reggie, being older and of a different generation, just feels that Dr. King is stirring up things. He's a voice for the southern black man, but by coming to the north, it's just stirring the pot and causing all sorts of problems, and even those white boys, had King not been there, would have minded their own business. But he does start cleaning off his son's bruised face. Lee says that it's easy for his dad to keep a blind eye because he didn't know what it's like not being able to do anything about the racism. After all, he got to fight Nazis head on. Reggie tells his son that it wasn't exactly a matter of killing Nazis, and killing should not be something you're ambitious about. He goes on about how it wasn't about trying to kill the men. Being a fighter pilot, his goal was shooting at the aircraft, sometimes never even thinking of the man inside. That night, Reggie lays awake in bed, remembering his time during World War II as an airman. As Blue Leader, he nailed a Nazi bird, but watched as a German pilot climbed out of his, well, I'm assuming it's a Messerschmitt, but hey, I don't have a good working knowledge of every type of German World War II aircraft, and the German leaps from the plane, his parachute flying off as he plummets to the ground hard. Then we get a flash of dialogue, just in fragments, before a quick cut to what I can only gather is Reggie being beaten up, because even when he could be an officer in the military, there were those, especially in Alabama, that were very much against that. He shoots out of his bed with a jolt, goes to stare out the window, as his wife asks if he's okay. A bit later, I think shading-wise says it's dawn, Lee starts painting the backyard's fence white. There's a whitewashing reference I'm trying to ignore for this. It's hard. Powerful hard. But it is tons of fun. That's a literary reference that most people probably won't understand. I am so sorry. But while Lee is painting the fence, he talks with his mother about his father. Lee is just so angry about the fact that Reggie seems to be so calm and restrained, even when you can tell that he's right pissed off. His mom asked if he would prefer his father getting drunk and whooping his butt, with Lee saying that would at least be a reaction. His mother says that it's just the way Reggie is, the way he had to grow up and figure out how to be able to get through it all. Lee then goes off saying that if his dad fought the big war for freedom, why did he stop? The black man is still in the ghettos, and we're stuck under Jim Crow until Dr. King came along. Hell, Lee's not even free to go see Dr. King speak in his own home. And his mom says something that I think truly resonates with history as a whole, far more than anything else this book says. People who fight for freedom don't always like what gets done with that freedom. Of course, she also asks if Lee ever asked his dad about the war. Of course not. Lee goes back to painting the fence as his mom leaves. We follow the mom, oh man, I don't think we get her name in this issue, over to go see Reggie at the Silver Pony, who's running inventory on the bar. Reggie brings up a real good point. He worked really hard so that Lee didn't know what a ghetto really felt like. He worked damn hard so Lee could grow up in a real house with food on the table every night. He was able to go to a good school, but the mom counters that, yeah, Lee got the education and learned things they never did. He wants to make the world a better place. There's no harm in that. But Reggie says that Lee just doesn't understand the cost of making things better. However, he shrugs off answering what that means. Yet she stands firm that Lee needs to hear this. Men may not be able to talk to each other, but he's a boy who's going to leave the house one of these days, and all he has right now is what he's figuring out for himself. By the time Reggie gets home from the bar, Lee is still out painting the fence. Reggie brings out 2 beers, saying that all the hard work would give a man quite a thirst. Lee isn't sure if one of those beers is for him, but Reggie says there's soda in the fridge, but that's for boys, and right now there's no boys in this yard. They sit down on the porch and Reggie finally opens up to his son. In war, of course it's a matter of killing. To win that specific war, it was about killing millions of people. While he was a fighter pilot, there would be 1 or 2 men in each plane he went after, but his squadron would escort bombers, and the amount of people on the ground they'd take out was far more. He's done lying and he's going to tell his son everything. So, it was 1942 and the war was over 2.5 years old. But for America, it was only 6. If you have no idea why America entered World War II, pick up a book. Yet even before that, throughout the 30s, Hitler was making speeches about the Aryan Superman. Yet a few people shot really good holes into that nonsense. Joe Louis, the boxing champion of the world at the time, knocked out a German to become champion of the world, and Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals at the Berlin Olympics. Both American, both black. There were many black men who wanted to stand against the racial foolishness of the Nazis. It was their fight as much as any white folk. Up till that point, though, the military was segregated with very few black officers and definitely no black pilots. However, they were going to change that in Tuskegee, Alabama. So many people were saying that they were slow to learn and easy to forget. Even the Secretary of War said that leadership was not embedded in the Negro race. Yet Hap Arnold, Chief of the Air Corps, stood with them, saying that maybe they'd best be suited as waiters in mess halls. Yes, that was literally one of his suggestions. Lee says how ridiculous that is, and Reggie says that yeah, it was ridiculous, but the most ridiculous thing is that someone was going to have to prove how stupid that mentality was. But that's where the story ends, to be continued in the next issue. Now, elephant in the room, because of course people will bring this up, I am a white guy. I was raised in North Carolina as the only white kid in my neighborhood for about 6 years, after my dad got discharged from the military due to the Clinton administration. Then we moved to central New York, where I've been trapped ever since. Why does this matter? Because there's something that Reggie brings up in the beginning of this that you could easily brush over, but there is legitimately a huge divide between the North and the South when it comes to racial tensions. However, I'm also not going to turn this into me talking about race. By God, the book does a damn good job on its own, and I really want this channel to at least be a place to escape from the standard baiting of the press. So, if you want a really good race talk, pick up this trade. Instead, I'm going to bring up a larger universal truth brought up in this, at least in the framing of this story, to talk about the Tuskegee Airmen. The truest truth in this is that the generational gap will always be there. Every generation does what they feel is best for the next generation, to give them a better life than what they had. But because of that, the next generation has their standard set a bit higher. So when Lee brings up the ghetto, he doesn't understand where Reggie lived and what a ghetto was in his mind. It's a mindset that also slips in when it comes to the world of, I did this all for you, why do you think that wasn't enough? It's a hard truth that does also change between person and person. I mean, I have family members who are relatively wealthy and can't comprehend the level of poverty I live in. But I'll admit that I can also say that ever since I became a father, yes, I know my oldest is only 3 years old, so I don't get grizzled old dad points. I do tend to side with parents, though. I brought this up when I covered some book about teens in school, but on the other side, I do understand Lee's almost bewildered view of his father, because I think a lot of men never do have that heart-to-heart with their dad in the formative years of, okay, I'm ready to leave the house. However, I don't want to bring up my own daddy issues, so I'm just going to leave that at that. Oh, and on an actual reader note, I personally really dig the fact that while the art style is similar to the modern indie style, where I could compare it to Second Sight, you know, the comic I did last week, or yesterday depending on perspective, what makes this unique is the same thing that I praised about Second Sight. While Second Sight really felt like a British indie book from the 80s and 90s, this actually reminded me of the 70s, 80s military comics like the Nam or Sergeant Rock of the time. Of course, part of the awesome comes from the fact that the look, at least for the dogfights, that maybe I'm just transplanting my love for that era and genre onto this, but I think it really works to show the contrast of the modern of the comic to the World War II flashbacks. So with that 3-page diatribe done, tomorrow we get into the harsh reality of the Tuskegee Airmen trying to prove their place in the world. And hopefully my foot doesn't have to go anywhere near my mouth tomorrow. So see you then. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe. If you agree or disagree with me, leave a comment below. Check out my other 2 channels, Comic Archivist and ComicSins. Become a patron to get to choose the next comics we do for a comic a day. And as always, stay golden, Inklings.
Watch the skyways, or the land and the sea, are ready to fly.